Hey Laowinners, it's Laowinner here with another video. Today we're just gonna hang out and talk about something really positive, like how China is totally tricking you and fooling you, and the world's gonna end, and this is gonna be civil war, and then World War III, and then how they've infiltrated all of our institutions and internet and life, and how everything's doomed. It's all over, guys. It's all over. At least that's what you might think. If you turn on the news, I'm going to do a little PSA in the beginning of this to say, if you find some time in the day where you are on the internet reading news articles or listening to smear campaigns about political campaigns, or you're going through your mail and you're seeing this party said this or this party said that, or it even comes up in conversation because that's all that anyone wants to talk about right now, take some time out of the day. Take a step back, turn everything off, and go outside. Take a big swig of that fresh air that we have here in the U.S. or whatever country you're in, assuming your country has fresh air. And just clear your head and put that stuff away for a little while, because it is getting outlandish and insane. It's actually driving me crazy. So, although this topic is quite negative, because I feel like I really have to get something off my chest that really effing pisses me off to no end, I still want to remind everyone out there that not everything you consume has to be negative or finger pointing or toxic. Please remember that the world is not ending, and although we do have to deal with a horrific pandemic, at least here in the US right now, find some time in the day just to keep your sanity. Get some exercise. Don't sit there and be engulfed in what mass media wants you to be engulfed in. It's a dying medium. Let them die an honorable death, or just say dishonorable death, and just clear your head, because that's what I need to do in this time. Now, I want to go out there on a record and say I am really freaking tired of hearing a phrase, and this is what I'm addressing today. If I ever hear the words anti-China again, I'm going to implode. It has become so meaningless and so stupid of a phrase, and it's thanks to the Chinese government that this has become such a meaningless phrase that I can't even use to criticize people anymore that are legitimately being anti-Chinese. The Chinese government's effectively completely destroyed this phrase. Yet people, it's working. It's working on people. And this is what I really, really want. I want to put the last nail in the coffin today. Despite me, it's very awkward right now because all these people are passing me in this shopping mall in China right now as I rant about this. And I obviously have this office chair right in the middle of everyone's way. But hopefully I don't get in anyone's way or knock anyone over or whatever. Anyway, that guy just gave me a dirty look. So, the hot button issue is this anti-China thing. Now, why do I bring this up? Well, right now, currently, it's I'm not going to say anti, because then I'm just playing into the whole thing. I'm going to say the propaganda pushing back against the West right now, actually just against the entire world right now in China, is absolutely mind-blowing. Some Chinese friends have been even skeptical about what the hell's going on. So, the younger Chinese populace, the older Chinese populace, there's ebbs and flows. Whatever country is hated in the media at this point in time, it could be Canada, it could be America, or whatever. Currently, it's America. It could be Japan. That's like ebbs and flows. It doesn't affect the local populace too much, depending on education level, but there's a flavor of the weak country that you're supposed to hate if you're in China, depending on what diplomatic foible you did to piss off that large, hammer and sickle baby in the East. Literally, China, if you could equate the mainland China, communist China, if you just look at a country to a person, it's like a fat bully that is mentally behind everyone else, but uses his mass to throw his weight around in tantrums to piss everyone off and to make everyone feel like they're beholden to him through intimidation and whining. Anyway, long story short, right now, in China, some of my Chinese friends sent me some propaganda posters that have even blown my mind. I mean, I've seen everything from like Shui Xi Lei Feng. If you don't know who Lei Feng is, he's like this completely made up character that like was a hero for the Communist Party of China. But right now, the propaganda, I kid you not, I'll translate one. that's been going around. Imagine this big poster. Maybe I'll put this in post because this is live right now. It's a big poster, and it's got Xi Jinping, Winnie the Pooh, leader of China for life. And it says, now more than ever, we need to put our faith behind Comrade Xi, or sometimes it says Deputy General or Secretary General, whatever, Xi Jinping. Now more than ever. And there's all this posturing for war. I mean, when I lived in China, it was all about how China is the most peaceful nation in the world. And now it's like, everyone get ready for war and all this bullshit. And it's just ramped up beyond belief. And it's this straw man thing, right? You need to have an enemy somewhere else for your own fragile society and fragile government to flourish, to continue to survive, really. So, how does this tie into the whole phrase anti-China? You can watch if you're reading Global Times or like China Daily or any like Chinese media coming from the state mouthpiece, this phrase gets thrown around all the time. It's like anti-China forces, anti-China countries, anti-China leaders, anti-China influencers, anti-China this, anti-China that. And really, when you look at it, when this phrase gets thrown around by Chinese state media in English, or in Chinese as well, what it actually means is someone criticizing the Communist Party of China, or criticizing China's human rights records, or criticizing the way the Belt and Road Initiative is going, or criticizing the way it has diplomatic relations with North Korea, or criticizing anything that a lot of, I would say most countries find reprehensible about the Chinese government. That is equated to anti-China. It's not anti-China's government. It's not anti-CCP. It's not anti-communism. It's not anti-authoritarianism. It is not none of those things. It is anti-China. I'll tell you why. Finally, and I'm super happy about this, the Chinese government's just come out and said it. Why does the Chinese government hate me and Chinese dissidents? I mean, there's a lot more Chinese dissidents than me, right? Like, there's a lot more outspoken voices out there in Chinese, especially in Taiwan or Hong Kong and things like this, that are actually speaking Chinese to the Chinese-speaking populace out there about these issues. Why are they anti-China when, in fact, they're only criticizing the leadership of China, the Communist Party of China? Well, that's because they finally came out of the woodworks and just stood up and said it. Xi Jinping actually said, we must never allow the separation of the Communist Party of China and the people of China, which is literally the goal and purpose of my message and every other Chinese dissident in the world's message, is to say, listen, Chinese people are just human beings that deserve the freedoms and rights and pretty much everything else that people strive for in this world, right? To say that they don't deserve those things and they deserve to be under the thumb of one party rule, whether they consciously enjoy that or not, to me is anti-China, right? So for the Communist Party of China to just go out there on record and say, we must never separate the people from the party, when that's exactly what human rights activists try to do. I mean, think about this, like, when somebody claims asylum because their parents were thrown in a black prison, which is not what you might think it is. A black prison is like an unregistered prison so that people can be off the books in China. When somebody's family gets thrown in there because they spoke out against a local politician or a local party member, or even were in a rival company or something, and the other company had higher government ties. Because keep in mind, China is not, it is not this free market paradise that you may think. What it is it's a cutthroat free market paradise. That means that if your business is to be successful, you need to know or have connections with the Communist Party of China. So it's not a free market society in that way. Let's say you're in a rival company and that person has connections to the Communist Party of China. They can F up your entire life and destroy your company overnight, and maybe come up with arbitrary things that get you in jail, throw your family in jail, get you tortured, get you disappeared. China's law, there's no rule of law, right? People get disappeared all the time. The thing about that is, if you're talking about a country that does this to its own human beings, to me, that is anti-China, right? To me, I think to the average person, that means you're anti-Chinese people because you don't believe in a free society. You don't believe that they deserve an improvement past an economic prosperity, right? Keep in mind, China is not this free market capitalist paradise as well, because it's a caste system. If you look at the bottom level of Chinese society, the absolute bottom level of Chinese society, where people are in the countryside and they lack clean running water or access to reliable electricity and things. They're on a whole different level than somebody that has party connections at the top, right? Or even someone that lives in a 5th tier city, right? Wildly different castes, and these people don't mix, right? This is not a socialist paradise. You can't say China is a free market socialist experiment gone right and how they did everything correctly, when this government watches over its citizens like ants, Big Brother, right? Just watching you, surveilling you, cameras on every corner. I'm not joking. Literally follows and tracks your every movement. Keep in mind, when I got arrested by the SWAT team up north in Inner Mongolia, they knew everything about me that I've ever done in China across the entire country, right? I'm talking about where I usually shop, what things I usually buy. Usually gets a 6-pack of beer and then also a bottle of whatever at the time. Which park I usually go to, and I'm talking about I was thousands of miles away, right? I'm talking about a country that does that to its own citizens, right? Constantly surveilling them, monitoring their every action, and then restricting every access to outside material, outside websites, discussion, actively suppressing that voice so that they don't want to be part of the international community. Despite everything that China says about the West trying to block them from being, anti-China forces blocking them from being part of an international community, China does that to themselves. They block off their citizens knowingly on purpose so that they can't participate in global conversations, right? You're talking about a country, a socialist paradise, one that lifted millions of people out of poverty. Who put them there in the first place? Lifted all these people out of poverty. Yet, at the same time, they don't offer their citizens almost any social programs. Almost any social programs. To me, that's anti-China. That's an anti-Chinese force. When you don't take care, if you label yourself as a communist country and the party is always right and we must put our trust in the party because they take care of us. If you have a system like that, keep in mind the same system that killed tens of millions of people under famine and authoritarianism and communist experiments. When you have a system, the same government that treats life like absolute garbage, honestly, like pre-vaccine trials before they're even safe for human consumption being tested on large populations. Think about what happened to the frickin' AIDS patients. Dude, governments in China took the blood out of people. They paid for their blood because volunteerism and donations are not very common. Paid for, this is like in the 2000s, 90s and 2000s. Paid for people's blood, mixed it into basically a big vat because they found out that the villagers wanted their blood back. So they would take whatever plasma or whatever they need out of the blood, then sell it back to them, which caused a massive AIDS epidemic. And then when they found out about it, they were like, oh, we didn't do that. That's not the government's fault. And then they lock them into AIDS villages where everyone just dies. The AIDS villages. They still exist, okay? We're talking about a government that literally treats its citizens like ants, but then goes out on the world stage to say, look we champion human rights. How dare you question our human rights abuses because look at the greater good that we've accomplished, right? This is not a paradise. To me, again, this is a government that is anti-China. So I've seen, whether it's TikTok, YouTube, I'm not going to put any names on blast, but I'll tell you why I'm so pissed off right now and why I had a whole video planned. I'm trying to do more positive content these days, more humor-based content, but I am so effing tired. I am so effing sick of this word anti-China that I had to do this. And I'm not going to name names, but if you go out there and find influencers that use the word anti-China forces or anti-China this or anti-China that, and then in the same breath support or congratulate the Communist Party of China, that is anti-China. Do you know what it is? It's actually a domestic thing. It was originally created to prey on Western sensibilities to shut down the conversation. Let me pose a hypothetical thing to you right now. The Communist Party of China, although it looks like it's trying to take over the world and it's expansionist and with the Belt and Road Initiative and it's trying to put military bases in Sri Lanka and it's threatening Taiwan and all this kind of stuff, China, that's not how Chinese history works. I think a lot of China watchers currently would think of it like an Asian version of America or something, some imperialist society over there trying to focus on world domination. In some ways, that's kind of correct. In some ways, but it's more so to keep its domestic populace subdued and quiet. So, why do you think there's so many internet trolls like Wumaos, right, that get paid to go out there, get on a VPN? The government allows them to use a VPN to go out and then steer any narrative or say good things about China or shit on the West or do whatever to shut down any conversation that's negative about China or the Chinese government. Why do you think there's so many, funded people to go do that from the Chinese government? It's very simple, right? Just think about it for 2 seconds. The Chinese government doesn't want people to go on a VPN to go and to see other things. They don't want that to happen. The most important thing for the Chinese government is to shut that conversation down. So to use the phrase anti-China, what it does is it preys on Western sensibilities, right? So it doesn't matter if you're black or white or whatever, you're Korean, you're from any country, right? Or any ethnicity, I should say. When you hear something anti-China, that's immediately like equated with like a race thing. I say it preys on Western sensibilities in that it preys on Western race sensibilities. That's something that people are very, very sensitive about. I mean, I think, where I live, at least in Los Angeles, is a pretty tolerant society. I know there's a lot of race issues within the US, but by and large, I mean, like if you're gonna compare apples to apples here, China is the hands down most racist country I've ever been to in my entire life. And they know that if you say something like anti-China, a lot of people will just stop. So if you're starting to criticize the government, if you're like, yeah, Xi Jinping looks like Winnie the Pooh, or I heard the Xinjiang concentration camps are systematically getting rid of an entire minority group within China. I heard that, China is using slave labor in Africa on their gold mines and diamond mines. I heard that China's fishing vessels are going around and literally destroying every coral reef population and depleting the worlds of all fish so that we won't have any more left. If you say something like that, and you say, yeah, how can such a horrible government be allowed to exist? All of a sudden, the Chinese government will use the word anti-China. And that's so that person, that non-Chinese person, stops that conversation. That's the goal. It's for the domestic audience. And I'll tell you why they do this. If you've been to China, you know that there are incredible amounts of very smart, forward-thinking people. There are. I'm not talking about the lost generation, the older people. I'm talking about the people in my generation. There are a lot of progressive, forward-thinking people that are like, you know what, there's probably a world outside of this, and I won't be consumed by this hyper consumerism and like shut my mouth and don't talk bad about the government. There's a lot of people talking about stuff in China. I mean, you'll see it. You'll see it and you'll have it in private conversations there. However, what the CCP knows, what the Chinese Communist Party knows, what they're successful at is that they can say the word anti-China to shut down that conversation, because what they've effectively done is say the rest of the world is anti-China and we are Chinese, and then successfully equate the government with the people. Now, I'm even talking about people that might be critical of the Chinese Communist Party. There are lots of them, like I said. You can take a group of very critical people in China. Let's say they live in Beijing and they have like little meetings, or they're like meet at the bars and they talk shit about the dictator and dictator the poo or whatever policies they shut down their favorite heavy metal bar because it's bad Western influence or whatever. This still happens, by the way. What the problem is that when the CCP uses this word anti-China, it creates, number one, it shuts down that conversation, so there's no discourse anymore. There's no other opinion about why the Chinese government might be bad. That's shut down. So what you've done is you've created a global enemy that can't talk to you anymore. And you've created a global enemy, so now, despite you being critical of the Chinese Communist Party, you're more apt as a Chinese person to latch on to something that's your greater group. It's kind of like a tribal thing. It's just like anybody in the world, right? We all have a bit of patriotism or nationalism or whatever it is inside of us, our group. I'm a Chargers fan. I love the LA Chargers, my favorite football team. There's a bit of tribalism there, right? Especially if we go up against a team that's not well liked amongst my team. It's a natural thing to do, like I don't know, like the Raiders or something. God. Anyway, it's a tribal thing. So when you effectively shut down that argument and create a global enemy, the rest of the world versus China, even if that means, okay, the CCP is our leader and we have to follow that. That's better than going against the entire world. That's better than having to go out there and be like, you know what, I'm not that anymore. It doesn't make any sense, right? You're gonna latch on to what you are, what group you're a part of, right? Not only that, it's incredibly dangerous for you to be outspoken about that in China. You will get disappeared. You'll get jailed. You'll be shut down. You'll lose your job. Your family will be affected. So it's this kind of domestic tool to make everyone in China not a part of the international community because there's a greater global enemy, right? It's a very, very common tactic. And it also shows the fragility of how weak the Communist Party of China is and actually how strong they are. I say weak in that their ideology is weak. When I go back to the whole social programs thing, everything that the Chinese Communist Party claims to have done is not up to them. If you're talking about post-1979 economic boom of China, it's not the Chinese Communist Party that did that. It's literally foreign companies that were finally allowed to go into China and start a manufacturing hub. The Chinese Communist Party didn't do that. They stopped it up until then. It was the hardworking Chinese people that did that. So if you say the Chinese Communist Party lifted all these people out of poverty and look at what they did, and you equate the success of the Chinese people with that government, you are anti-China. Especially if you're a Western influencer saying this, if you go on YouTube and see some of these people that will actually parrot CCP narrative or shills or whatever you want to call them, do whatever you want. I'm not going to put those people on blast. What I will do, though, is say, if you're watching these people and buying the shit that they're talking about, I mean, you're watching some of the least moral human beings go out on a limb to support an authoritarian regime that tortures people, that literally disappears people, that has a unbelievably evil power structure in the way that it operates. And if you spent any amount of long time in China to understand how society works, you would understand that. If you're watching people parrot this narrative and using the word anti-China, you're watching racists. You're watching racist people that want to keep Chinese people under their thumb in this authoritarian regime. You're watching racists, and you're watching people that would literally rather keep themselves safe by parroting CCP narrative, by parroting the Communist Party of China propaganda, because they know how it works. They can't be that stupid. They know how it works. They know how it can be gone in an instant. They know how it can go from zero to apeshit in 2 seconds in China if the government decides to. The anti-foreign rhetoric is very real. It can come and go, but it's a tap. It's a tap that the government turns on. And right now it's dicey to be a foreigner in China. I mean, honestly, if you're one of the few people that stayed, I mean, I understand that there's probably a lot of reasons. Maybe your company's still there or whatever, but you got to understand, you have to take a lot of the stuff with a grain of salt, because you're watching people that maybe normally were completely apolitical or just talking about normal stuff. Like a lot of the mild stuff was pretty apolitical. I was always throwing in a little bit of a tinge of dissatisfaction with the way things were going, obviously. But if you watch some of these channels that go from zero to like absolutely balls to the wall apeshit pro CCP, you got to start questioning it. You got to start wondering, is this some neck saving? Are they saving their own skins right now? Because it's pretty dicey to be in China right now. If it just looks suspicious, it is suspicious, because the CCP is going apeshit with soft power right now. Again, it's mostly for a domestic audience. But at the same time, you cannot go out there and use, and I'm talking to anyone, Chinese Communist Party mouthpiece media or whatever, and throw this word anti-China around unless you truly mean that somebody is being anti-China. Because if somebody was truly being anti-China and I heard that, I would have some very choice words with them. If you are being anti-Chinese people, if you are degrading Chinese people as a race or even as a culture, if you're degrading Chinese people as something less than what you are, then you're a piece of shit. But guess what? It stops there. Because if you're talking about criticizing the Communist Party of China because you disagree with the system, that is your freedom to do so, and you have every right to do so. And so does every other Chinese person that doesn't have a voice. Whether you think so or not. You're not defending the CCP. If they actually need defense, they don't give a shit about you. You're a peon. Value of life is so cheap, You will be run over and murdered in China before you have any actual feasible use in your own mind. Trust me on this. Look at any authoritarian regime. You are cannon fodder, and you will be disposed of when you're not useful anymore. Whether that's by nefarious means or whether that's by, like, you're not needed anymore. You don't have a job. You can't live here anymore. There goes your visa, right? So really, really start thinking about this in a different narrative. The reason I brought this up was some patrons were asking me these questions, and they said, how do I bring up a conversation where I criticize the Chinese government because I feel like their influence around the world is a very negative thing, and I think it's the worst thing for Chinese people who have to live under a surveillance state with human rights atrocities abound. How do I bring that up without being anti-China? And I was like, you're not anti-China for bringing that up. That's not a thing. But unfortunately, in this day and age, that's something we actually have to explain to people. We actually have to explain to people why literally corporations and literally people are going around trumpeting what we can almost equate to Mussolini's Italy. Pieces, sprinklings of Hitler's Germany. Definitely a heavy dollop of Lenin and Stalin, the Soviet Union. But with money and with surveillance and with technology. Stolen technology, that is. But we live now in a society. I'm going to finish that. We live in a society where companies like the NBA, Sony now, Blizzard, all these companies and people are going around and actually supporting this regime. And to me, it blows my mind because that is funding exactly what the world does not need right now. Don't forget which government put us in this pandemic in the first place. Let's not F around. And that is why I'm so pissed off. It's a systematic trick to use the word anti-China when actually you mean you care deeply. You care deeply about Chinese people, about the country you lived in for 10 years, your family and friends, and this bullshit authoritarian dictator and propaganda is coming between that and ripping that root, those beautiful roots that you saw from 2008 to 2013. Those beautiful roots that I saw growing where China was becoming an international part of the community, where China was bright-eyed and bushy-eyed, bright-tailed and bushy-eyed, and very, very positive about their integration within the world, as was everyone else. That's where the West effed up, for lack of better words. They thought it would liberalize and democratize, and it didn't. With more money, you can pump money at a dictatorship. It doesn't mean it gets more freedom. The framework wasn't there for freedom. The framework wasn't there for China to be a diplomatic player on the world's field. It wasn't. And unfortunately, I was tricked too. Hope for the best for China. Love China. Love Chinese people. Love everything that comes with Chinese culture. Love the language. Learn the language. But do not for 1 second say it is anti-China to be critical of the Chinese government. Thank you. And I'll take some super chats. Chris Swenson said, there should be a vote on who is the patron saint of China. ADV China, China Uncensored, or Epoch Times. I think the patron saint of China should probably be Chinese. I think that would make a lot more sense, wouldn't it? Proto Man says, they really believe the CCP cut COVID by 100%. You wouldn't believe how many people actually believe that. Tomorrow on the podcast, we're going to be talking about that, the mass testing that was happening within Qingdao. Sneaky Oyster says, thanks for shedding light on what's going on in China. Keep up the great work and enjoy some pizza. And me. I'm not going to enjoy you, but I appreciate that. I am a married man. I will enjoy some pizza, though. Thank you very much. Unless you're saying enjoy some oysters, because I do love oysters. Someone just snuck behind me, by the way. I think it's an assassin. Mike F., thanks for your hard work, C-Milk. And thank you, Mike F. I really appreciate it. And Will A., if you said the same about the U.S., you would be called a socialist or communist that wants to destroy the U.S. The issue, Trump has allowed this to happen. Okay, very quickly. a lot of people have been asking me about this whole Trump and Biden and all this kind of stuff. The reason I came up with this PSA in the beginning about to avoid, yes, be politically active, vote, especially vote in local politics and stuff. But do not ask me about these things, because right now, especially with all these investigations, let's let the authorities deal with it, and we'll see what comes out of that. The blame can be put on anyone at this very volatile moment. But right now, I'm talking about China. This is my channel. This is what I talk about. In hip love X, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Sorry for the negativity on this one, guys. I totally understand. I do want to clear up this whole narrative, though. It's absolutely insane. It'd be cool if the crunching in the background would stop. Someone's eating snacks.
Sorry, I'm taking my gloves off over
Someone's eating crispy snacks in the background. I understand that people are trying to avoid negativity in this, at this moment, and that's why I started this whole thing. Please get outside, do something positive, spend time with your family, go have some fun, go get some exercise. It's very important in this toxic landscape we're in right now to do so. But don't ever let someone tell you that criticism of the CCP is anti-China, because that's just bullshit. Peace.